Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to Abnormal Voyages. My name is David, and today we find ourselves in Louisville, Kentucky. Baseball is the great American pastime and one of the most popular sports in the entire world. And one of the most iconic pieces of baseball is the baseball bat, as you can see right next to me here. We are here now at the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory to see how these awesome bats are made. Tag along.
We're going to a place that you've never heard of before. It's Abnormal Voyages. You're gonna learn something new. We're gonna open new doors. It's Abnormal Voyages.
We begin by going behind the scenes into the actual factory where the Louisville Sluggers are made. Unfortunately, they do not allow video photography, so we're going to respect that. They do let you take regular pictures, so we're going to take plenty of those, put them together, and still walk you through the process of these awesome bats. Come on! Before we enter the actual factory floor, our tour begins much like the life of a baseball bat. Here, surrounded by trees in the woods. This is where the life of a baseball bat starts. These are billets. They're all the same shape, but they do come from different kinds of trees. Depending on the wood that you want your bat made out of will determine what billet is right for you and your bat. Choosing the right wood for your baseball bat is an essential part of its creation. These different woods have different pros and cons, and it really comes down to your style of play. For modern day, about half of the pro bats out there are made from northern white ash, and the other half comes from maple. As you can see, the factory has a huge amount of billets that are all ready to go and become baseball bats. The billets are laid out and will all become different bats depending on their weight and thickness. Some pro players actually have a whole stack of billets in their specifications put aside, ready for when they need new inventory. When the order is placed for some new professional bats, they'll come here to this very special machine that's going to craft and create that bat exactly how the customer needs it. Louisville Sluggers have a long history of making special specific bats for their pro players. There was even a bunch of signatures on the machine here, all from players who had their bats made out of this exact factory. It's incredible that these piles of plain wood will soon become these custom masterpieces. The process is pretty much the same for regular retail bats, the ones that aren't going to specific pro players. They just happen to be able to do it in bigger quantities. The billets are loaded into the machines, and almost in an assembly line type process, they go through and all get the exact same shape to them. After that, they'll all be moved over to a sander to give them that perfect shape. This is where the bat will get all its fine tuning before it goes off to the next step. Behind me we have a setup of a station where they sand the bat to help really give it its shape. You can see some of the wood here, what it starts out as, and then the more refined baseball shape. This is how the bats were sanded back before the more modern machines were created. It was certainly a much slower process going one by one, but it still yielded an amazing product at the end. Here's an example of the pieces that are actually shaved off, cut off of the bats. This is kind of the thicker ones here, and then the thinner ones. These are on the tops and bottoms, and that machine we saw gets these off so you can get that perfect bat shape. Once the bat had the shape you wanted, it was time to finish up with branding. This is where each bat would get the signature Louisville Slugger logo, as well as sometimes little extra things on there just to make your bat special. The freshly shaved bats would come over looking just like this, then they can be hung up and all spray painted together at once. This was a really cool process, and it allowed them to get tons of bats done all together, and hanging upside down like that ensured that they had the proper coverage over the entire thing. And of course, black was not the only color they painted their bats. You could get them in pretty much any shade you like. When it was all said and done, you had a huge variety of amazing baseball bats to choose from. Definitely a very cool process to watch happening. And with every tour, you get to take home your very own mini Louisville Slugger. So now we know how the bats are made, but what about the company behind it? What is the history of where they came from? Well, I'm glad you asked. We're going to look into that right now. Our story begins with Bud Hildrick, who was born in Louisville in 1866. As a teenager, Bud helped out his father at the family woodworking shop, but one day he decided to play hooky and went to a local baseball game. During that game, player Pete Browning got up to the plate and smashed the ball so hard that his bat broke in two. Bud offered to make Pete a brand new bat at his father's shop, and Pete accepted. The bat did so well for Pete in the next game that soon other players wanted one of these bats as well. After convincing his father that baseball bats were the future for this company, the Louisville Slugger was born. Being a museum about baseball bats, it only makes sense that they have many famous bats on display. This is a bat that was owned by the one and only Joe DiMaggio, but he's not the only player that they have represented. These cabinets here you can open up and see the Louisville Sluggers that belonged to many of the sport's great legends. Joe DiMaggio famously had an extremely long streak of games where he got hits with, and every single one was with a Louisville Slugger. There were 3 bats involved in his entire streak. This one was number 3. Not too far away from this bat, we find Shoeless Joe Jackson's Louisville Slugger. Though there is some controversy that stains his legacy a little bit, I don't think anybody can deny that Shoeless Joe Jackson is truly one of the baseball greats. Storing the baseball bats in drawers was really cool. You could pull one out and you never knew who you were going to run into, such as this one that had Hugh Duffy, Eddie Murray, and David Ortiz, all with bats that were used in games. Most of these super well-known players were out in display case, such as this tribute here to Jackie Robinson, number 42, and this bat owned by Hank Aaron, who held the home run record for 33 years before being passed by Barry Bonds. And of course, you can't do any kind of baseball museum without mentioning the great Bambino, Babe Ruth. As a matter of fact, Babe Ruth loved Louisville Sluggers so much that he signed a contract with them that allows them to make signature Babe Ruth baseball bats forever. For over 100 years, Louisville Sluggers have been an important part of the story of baseball. They've been there to help elevate the game and truly push athletes to perform to their very best. Though it may have started as just a simple piece of wood, they've crafted it into something that stands for hope and dreams. And before we leave, we got a very special bat. This is, let's see if we can get up here, genuine Louisville Slugger, Abnormal Voyages. So now we're ready to get out there and hit all the home runs. Well, my name is David, and this has been Abnormal Voyages. Thanks for tagging along. We'll see you in the next one.